So during our class today, we discussed pinpointing and organizational diagnostics. I know we talked a little bit about pinpointing last week as it was introduced and kind of further delve deeper into pinpointing this week when it comes to just research and just organizational success. One thing that stood out to me this week was the organizational diagnostics. So OPM looks beyond just like the individual behavior, but how the behaviors of individuals and groups impact the overall organization. One of the statements you made regarding like single subject research and behavior analysis, single subject research is very common. It's our most used research tool. The challenge with single subject research, it can be difficult to generalize across larger populations. So, statistics, you're using large group populations, and when you get the results, it's a little bit easier to generalize across larger populations because of the large amount of participants. But one of the limitations to single subject research is that it typically is a small group of participants. So even if, instructional control is displayed or there's a functional relationship between the DV and the IV, it's hard to say if this will be generalized across larger populations. So when thinking about this and just organizational behavior management, when we look at organizational diagnostics, we have to ask ourselves, is what we're doing going to impact the organization, and how do we kind of shape behavior so that the organization thrives? I think one of the most common themes is session notes. I know you mentioned that. I know that that's just like a big challenge across organizations. So of course, timely session note completion is important for a lot of things. So when we are talking to BCBAs or RBTs and trying to pinpoint the reasons as to why they're not getting their session notes done in time, whether they feel like the session note is too demanding, right? Like the length of it is too much, or there's no motivation behind it. We have to figure out what the issue is and then how to address that issue. So when looking at finishing session notes on times, a lot of clinicians, so the BCBAs or RBTs, typically look at it from an individual level. So if I don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble. Or if I do this, then I'm checking off a task on my to-do list. However, when it comes to completing session notes on time, you discuss like circular reasoning. So looking at how issues kind of revolve in a circle and how it just kind of keeps revolving until it's resolved. So the issue is, if the BCBA doesn't complete their session note on time, then we can't submit to insurance. If we can't submit to insurance, then we don't get reimbursed. If we don't get reimbursed, or the organization doesn't get paid. If the organization doesn't get paid, then the BCBAs and RBTs and all employees don't get paid. So I think from a leadership level, we typically look at this and we look at the whole rationale for why it's important for session notes to be completed on time. But from an individual level, from like BCBAs and RBTs, they're not looking at it from like a holistic view, which is the barrier. I do find that BCBAs struggle with timely session notes a little bit more than RBTs, typically because RBTs are paid hourly. So if their session notes are not completed in time, then they literally cannot get paid, because that's how they convert their notes and then they get paid out. Whereas BCBAs who are salaried, they get paid regardless if their session notes are completed in time. So unfortunately, when the session notes are not completed for BCBAs, there's really not a lot of like motivating operation to get this done. So we typically have to turn to punitive measures, whether that's a policy review or write-up, after multiple attempts to like correct the issue and mitigate barriers, of course. But that's typically what it results in, my organization. So on Mondays, I go through all the open notes in my region, and I reach out to everyone and give them deadlines for closing notes from last week or the last few weeks or whatever the case is. And recently we had a lot of organizational changes. And one of the biggest changes, we use Rethink Behavioral Health as a platform. And one of the biggest changes is now insurances are requiring parents to sign off on session summary notes. But the challenge is, with a lot of BCBAs being remote, getting those parent signatures was almost impossible, like in a timely manner, because of the way the platform works. So as we were kind of mitigating through that huge organizational change, it got to a point where like across the state, we had like 900 open sessions over the course of a month. So it took a lot of collaboration from leadership and just feedback to BCBAs and RBTs and just cooperation to make sure that these were closed out. So we were able to get all these closed out, parent signatures, and then kind of figure out the best strategy to move forward. But I think the biggest idea is that trying to teach BCBAs or RBTs or employees how their behaviors impact the organization as a whole, and then how it relates to client outcomes, right? So if we look back at the session note cycle, if for some reason we didn't submit session notes in time and then insurance didn't pay us out and the organization didn't get paid, and then, BCBAs and RBTs don't get paid, if a BCBA or RBT is missing a paycheck, this may lead to them wanting to quit or not servicing clients because they're not getting paid. So then now the clients that we serve are impacted because of this. So, yeah.